Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman. Thank you for coming to my book review in the park. Today I have D.H. Lawrence's The Plumed Serpent. First published in 1926. D.H. Lawrence wrote this in Mexico. He might have written part of it outside of Mexico, but I know that he finished it in Oaxaca. And just shortly after finishing it, actually, D.H. Lawrence got struck down with malaria as well as some other disease, which later complicated his tuberculosis and ultimately led to his death. So I think this was probably his last novel that he wrote before he became really sick. And it is a novel that has many mixed reviews. If you read on Wikipedia all of the various reviews, some people thought it was D.H. Lawrence's greatest novel, and some people thought it was one of his worst and an utter failure. I try to read the reviews of other people after I've formed my own opinion of it. So it is always interesting to see how other people take it. Now, this is not necessarily a book for everyone. I read it because I'm a fanatic of D.H. Lawrence. I have many of his other reviews on this channel. I really like his style. I really like the way that he expresses his opinions. He doesn't pull any punches. He always goes strong, and he's passionate, and he's warm-blooded, and he says things that sometimes don't agree with our modern sensibilities or the political correct culture that we have today. And so I like it for that as well. It's sort of naughty in today's sense. So this was written almost 100 years ago. It takes place in Mexico. On a lake just outside of Guadalajara, and the main character, there's going to be some minor spoilers. I won't spoil the entire story, but I will tell you generally what the story is about. The main character is an Irish woman with hazel eyes that can change colors a little bit, named Kate. Kate is 40 years old, and she is down in Mexico with her boyfriend at the time, who is just an American guy, who's intelligent, who's thoughtful, who's kind, who's conscientious, but a little bit of a weakling, a little bit of a coward, not very warm-blooded, not a man who's really in his sex. Sex is a big topic in this novel, not sex in the way that we think about it in the Hollywood frame of mind, like pounding the person, rough style, or you know what I mean, without trying to be too crass. But sex as in our sexuality, and how deep it goes into the core of who we are, and how some people are in touch with it and some people are not in touch with it, how to get in touch with it, and how that transforms a person dependent upon their relationship with their sex, as well as gender sex. Like the differences between men and women, what completes a man, what completes a woman, how some women never complete themselves and turn into grimalkins. That was a word I learned. It's like it used to mean old cat, but it's like an old, bitter, resentful woman. Women who never really fully embraced their sexuality as women. They were too egotistical. So I'm talking about some of the themes that you may not like because they don't accord with modern feminism. But also the man who is hot-blooded, who knows how to be silent. The man is the column of blood. The woman is the valley of blood. I'm using some of Lawrence's metaphors. I'm getting a little ahead of myself talking about these themes when I didn't really tell you the story, right? So Kate, this 40-year-old Irish woman, is with her boyfriend, Joaquim, the American, I believe he's a writer, intellectual, who's a bit of a pussy. And his pussiness comes out in one of the first chapters. It might even be the first chapter, which is a bullfight. They are, I believe, maybe in Mexico City or Guadalajara, and they are watching a bullfight. And it's really crowded, and they're sitting there amongst the poor people because they want to get right up close in the action. And, you know, these people are pushy. They'll sit on your feet, you know, if you let them. And Joaquim lets them sit on his feet. He's a bit of a coward. He cannot mark his own territory. What kind of man is this? A very kind, considerate, intelligent man, very conscientious, but not a man. It really comes across. And he's really contrasted with a character that Kate meets as she leaves the bullfight, because she leaves the bullfight early because she's horrified. In fact, I was a little horrified myself. I don't consider myself squeamish, but I think Lawrence did a fantastic job of describing the bullfight. Remember, Lawrence did live in Mexico for extended amounts of time while writing this novel and had experience at a bullfight himself. And I'm not saying the bullfights are bad or anything like that, or that they're good, but just the bullfight as a phenomena is a very bloody, maybe artistic, maybe beautiful, maybe it's got all of these other merits. I have never been to one myself, but the way that Lawrence describes it, I was pretty horrified. Going along with Kate's feelings, she is the main character, and as she leaves the arena, she falls into this sort of like helpless stance. It's pouring rain. She doesn't know how she's going to get home. And then a general, not a young, but a short, dark-skinned, very, very debonair and confident general known as Don Cipriano, who becomes another main character, very contrasted with Joaquin, the American intelligent pussy. So Don Cipriano, the general, this dark Mexican guy who has a lot of Indian blood. Lawrence goes, whenever he's describing the Mexican characters, and a lot of the characters are Mexican because it takes place in Mexico, he really goes into the way they look, the way they feel, the way they think, the way they express themselves. He gets into their psychology. He talks about if they've got a lot of Indian blood or not a lot of Indian blood. He really makes these distinguishing points. And Don Cipriano comes to Kate's rescue, as fate would have it, and gives his cloak, protects her from the rain, shows her to a car or a taxi where she is whisked away into safety. And this fateful meeting, Kate would meet this man again later at another social event, and he would become intimately entwined with her life. Kate is confused throughout this novel. She doesn't know if she wants to stay in Mexico or she desperately wants to leave at points, so many points throughout the novel. In fact, I would say this novel is largely Kate battling within her soul whether or not to give herself and live in Mexico. Like, something deep inside of her is telling her to do that, but there's another part of her that is telling her, get out of Mexico. Mexico's going to kill you. You need to get back to civilization as you have known it throughout your life, whether that's in America or Europe. So there's this deep contrast between Mexico of that time, 1920s, and civilization, the machine world, as Lawrence likes to call it throughout this novel, the fair, square machine world in America where everything's so mechanistic, or Europe. And Lawrence makes even the distinction between Europe and America. America is completely prostituted itself to money and has really lost its soul, whereas Europe still has a soul but is sort of old. And so Lawrence, there's a lot of talk of the difference of nationality, of cultures, but also of races as well. The race of Mexicans are very different than the race of white people, not just culturally, not just in terms of fashion and speech and language and living patterns, but also in the very makeup of our nature, in our DNA, in our blood, in our something that is deeper than the superficial layers. So I think for some people, this book, let me just hold it up again, The Plumed Serpent, might come off as racist or sexist, depending upon your views. But it is very interesting to read, and I enjoyed a lot of it. I did not love it like I loved most of D.H. Lawrence's books. In fact, this was probably one of the books that I had to push myself to get through. However, that being said, there were quite a lot of very interesting parts that made me go pretty deep. It is a book also not only of cultural differences, not only of sexual differences, not only of racial differences, but a book also of religion and religious differences, as well as political. But religion is one of the primary themes of this book. The Plumed Serpent, in reference, I'm pretty sure, to Quetzalcoatl. I know I don't pronounce that as an Aztec probably would have, or a Mayan, or whatever the original language was. Quetzalcoatl, the ancient Mexican deity. The book is about the revival of this religion. This is one of the major events that happens. Kate, as she becomes involved with Don Cipriano, this short, dark-skinned, brave, and very wily general, as well as his friend and almost his patron, the man he looks up to, Don Ramon. Don Ramon and Cipriano are reigniting and building up this ancient religion towards Quetzalcoatl, as well as some of the other divinities within the ancient Mexican or Aztec pantheon, what have you. And they want Kate to be a part of it. They want Kate to be a goddess, and she does play a role. And she eventually becomes deeply entwined in the revival of this religion in these men's lives. Don Ramon is married to a very wealthy, devout Mexican, pale-skinned Mexican woman who is pious and devout to the Catholic faith. So there is this, what happens if you're deeply Catholic and then your husband says, I'm going to revive the old gods and go pagan? Well, there is a big schism in their marriage, and I won't spoil the story because I think it is very interesting, and it goes so deep. Everything with Lawrence goes pretty damn deep. It goes into the soul, and it goes even deeper than the soul. It goes into the blood, and then there's even something deeper than that. There's this morning star, this star that you can attain. There's a lot of star metaphor, star analogy, that within each of us is a star, and when we meet each other through vulgar contact, we might never actually truly meet each other in the real star space that we are meant to. I'm making it sound pretty hippy-dippy, but Lawrence does a much more eloquent job. But that the ideal way, especially for men and women to meet, but men and men as well, is on their separate paths. And Lawrence describes a lot of this. There's a lot of religious hymns in it, poetry that I didn't like at first, but once I kind of got into it, it actually was kind of cool. And you meet in this star space, still two individual stars, but two individual stars that merge into the true morning star. And in fact, we are not, one of the themes is individuality. Are we really individuals, or do we only become whole when we have surrendered ourselves or conquered the other person or have met another person in this morning star? And with a lot of religious iconography, it's not necessarily easy to define, but when you read it and you get the feel of what Lawrence is trying to talk about, it has a very deep significance. If you have read Women in Love, the character Birkin, who is in a relationship with the main character Ursula, Birkin talks a lot to Ursula about his ideal marriage. And it's not about love in the Western sense. It's not about possession. It's about this meeting like two perfectly constellated stars. So as I was reading The Plumed Serpent, I thought a lot about Birkin's conversations with Ursula in Women in Love. But you don't need to have read that to understand it, because Lawrence goes through these metaphors again and again, and Kate is all the time trying to resist this new religion, trying to resist the deep attraction and pull that she has for Don Cipriano, who becomes her husband. And she doesn't want to become a goddess, but she does. So she's just really torn apart. And I really identified with that, because there are a lot of times in my life where I am really pulled towards something, but I'm also really repulsed, and I feel like my soul is being twisted and torn. and she's 40 and I'm 40, and so I identified a lot with her, but there were a lot of times I was pretty annoyed with her. I was like, just make a decision, stop pestering everyone, because she was also a very harshly critical person. There's a lot of negativity towards the individuated, egomaniacal Western woman, powerful woman, and a lot of love for the traditional Mexican woman and their way of life, as well as a lot of criticism towards the Mexican race in a variety of ways, but praise as well. Lawrence, he's not black and white. He's got a lot of good and bad things to say about a lot of different people, modes of life, and whether you agree with him or you disagree with him, D.H. Lawrence's Plumed Serpent, the Plumed Serpent, will give you a lot of food for thought, as it did me. So, I guess I will leave it at that. I hope that you guys like this book review. Tell me what you think down below in the comments. My name is Ryan. Oh, I guess I'll save that for another day. I was going to tell you another theme. My name is Ryan. Bye-bye.